further we get into these sci-fi number years, the more chaotic and dystopian everything becomes, and I'm getting sick of it. Yeah! My top things of winter 2021. For anyone new to the channel or just unfamiliar with the concept, this is a seasonal series inspired by Super Eye Patch Wolf's My Favorite Things, Clems's Things I Love, and all the other semi-regular media and merch roundup videos across this hellscape of a site, in which I ramble about and recommend some of my favorite stuff from the last few months, with the occasional out-of-season straggler. And if you know something isn't here, then it probably means one of a few things. I didn't get around to it by the time I started making this video. While I did enjoy it, I have too many caveats and criticisms to recommend it. I just didn't like it. I don't have a lot to say about it beyond it was fun, it was chill, it was interesting, or it just keeps getting weirdly better, or I'm hoping to make a video on it and want to save as many of my thoughts on it for that as I can. And what better way to start this than with what I ran into? I've stumbled into a lot of online animations that blew me away recently with the creativity such relatively small teams are able to get out of such simple ideas, like Long Gone Gulch. This Kickstarter-funded pilot follows Snag and Rawhide, the sheriffs of a forgotten Old West town who, after being fired for their more destructive antics, fight to prove their worth as a gang of outlaws takes over. And I just adore the chaotic energy that bleeds through it. It has the kind of anarchic qualities of the old cartoons I grew up on, but brought to life with a modern coat of paint that makes it so refreshing to watch. Particularly in the strange way its general restraint, probably for the sake of a younger-ish audience, I think actually helps it work better than it would have otherwise.
I feel like cussing every time I look at this! What? What, you think you're better than me? Huh? Just cause you never been to juvie, huh?
It's just a damn good time I hope gets the chance to develop into something more. But the animations that caught my attention the most were ones with a more unorthodox approach, like Joel G's Ina and Dead Sound's Autodale. Though very different kinds of series, they share a similarly surreal playfulness in their exploration of their respective worlds. Ina is set in an abstract landscape of cubist designs and absurdist landscapes full of glitchy 3D models and borderline incomprehensible characters that feel more like visual manifestations of concepts than actual, well, characters. And that feels like it draws heavily on old school walk and click games for its tone and aesthetic, to the point that I wonder if an actual game was partially programmed to achieve this specific feel. I mean, I doubt it, but who knows? Meanwhile, Autodale explores its titular dystopia through a series of vignettes that give quick glimpses into its citizens' daily lives, one ruled by a rigid social order that deals with those who step out of line accordingly, and through each installment paints a wider picture of its grimdark post-apocalypse, from the biopunk machinations that run the city, to the mutants that wander its vast floating plains of broken physics and the robot cowboys that hunt them down when they get too close, to the psychosexual technology slowly draining a nature goddess of everything she's worked to keep Autodale alive. They each experiment with their own wild ideas in increasingly weird ways, and I just can't help but appreciate the dedication with which they do so. But it's not all nonsense, as I've also run into some genuinely insightful videos on all kinds of under-discussed topics, particularly in Laura K. Buzz's Accessibility, a series of videos about disability and gaming. Each one has been a genuine eye-opener for me in the clear-cut way it explains how all kinds of conditions can not only affect the way in which those with them can interact with the medium, but also the way they're represented in-game, the concerning way they're exploited for financial gain, and the surprisingly subtle and arguably simple tweaks that can make games and the industry surrounding them more, well, accessible. And in my experience, while many of these ideas may be known generally, the specifics the series explores always seems to elude even the most well-intentioned of people, and it's why I think it needs so much more attention. Sweet Home is a South Korean horror directed by Kim Seol-jin, produced by Studio Dragon and Studio N, and based on the webtoon of the same name by Kim Karnby and Hwang Young-chan, that follows Cha Hyun-soo, a troubled young man who, shortly after moving into a new apartment complex, finds himself and the other tenants trapped in a building riddled with nightmares as the world falls into the midst of a monster-fueled apocalypse. And admittedly, a lot of the show's appeal for me comes from its almost schlock horror tone, the in-your-face colors and lighting, the playfully grotesque and shocking imagery and cinematography it leans into to get some quick scares, the jank of its monsters, CGI and practical effects in a weird way adding to their uncanny fear factor, and man, don't get me started on that one fucking Imagine Dragons song they use in every episode, cause I don't know if it's just me, but feels like a B-movie in the best ways. But it has the technical strength to support these wackier elements, thanks in large part to the depth of its wide cast of characters. Each tenant of this apartment block is well fleshed out in their own way, even the ones who spend most of the series simply lingering in the background, as they all come to terms with the loss and grief this end-of-the-world scenario brings, whether it be the lives they used to live or the loved ones they'll never get to see again, with my personal favourites being So Yi-kyung, a former firefighter investigating the truth behind the death of her late fiancé, and Pyun Sang-wook, a scarred man with little to say exacting his own brand of justice on those who deserve it. Both are not only absolute fucking tanks, but are also the kind of characters whose murky morality leaves them in the complicated position of being well equipped to survive, but at an easy odds with their fellow survivors, as they do everything they can to find a reason to keep fighting. This show is its characters, and the way it explores their respective internal and interpersonal struggles is fascinating to watch unfold. Sweet Home is some good old B-movie nonsense with a narrative backbone to support its jankier elements. The Queen's Gambit is a period drama created by Scott Frank and Alan Scott, produced by Flickcraft Limited and Wonderful Pictures, and based on the novel of the same name by Walter Travis, set throughout the 50s and 60s as Beth Harmon, an orphan with a knack for playing chess, slowly rises through the ranks of its intensely competitive world. And there's a lot to like about this show, from the imagery and scenery and long shots to the characterization of its main characters, supporting cast, and the relationships between them all. But what stood out to me the most is the fact that in a lot of weirdly specific ways, it's essentially a shonen anime. Look, it's got a tournament arc, an orphaned main character with a tragic parental backstory, a knack for the game the series happens to center around, who wants to be the very best, is filled with attacks with their own unique names, painfully on-the-nose outfits and costumes, a harem of love interests, rivals who become allies, and of course, the power of friendship. It's not subtle. But like the shonen series that unintentionally share so much in common with, there's a fundamental understanding of what draws people to these kinds of stories in the first place. There's something inherently appealing about watching this kind of underdog story about characters with nothing to their name discovering their worth. Not just in terms of what they're able to prove to this world, but in the connections they build with those around them, who become their very own found family of friends who support each other through their ups and downs as they climb up a ladder this society's all too happy to knock them off of. It's just a very human story of someone, despite what the world may throw their way, discovering who they are and finding their proverbial tribe. And it's what, for me, makes The Queen's Gambit so compelling. And speaking of anime, this last anime season was absolutely dominated by sequels, spin-offs, and continuations. Some carrying on the appeal that made the original so beloved, others bringing it to new heights, or so I'm told because I'm like 40 episodes behind, and others still getting stuck in Netflix jail, or even, we don't talk about it. But the one that stands out to me is Cells at Work Code Black. Directed by Hideo Yamamoto, produced by Leiden Films, and based on the manga of the same name by Shigemitsu Harada and Issei Hatsuyoshi, and which acts as a spin-off of the original Cells at Work by Akane Shimizu, Code Black follows the daily lives of its anthropomorphized human cells struggling to stay afloat in a body that's slowly falling apart. Right from the get-go, it sets a grim tone. Cells are killed off in boatloads by all kinds of health hazards, from kidney stones ripping open capillaries, STDs slaughtering white blood cells, or inflammations literally vaporizing tissue like it was, well, tissue. It's only heightened by the 80s anime movie edge that radiates from its art and designs, all the way from the hairy, beefy masculinity of its killer teas and their unstoppable misdirected rampages, to the calm stoicism of its very well endowed white blood cells and their unshakable devotion to the job. It puts a dark spin on the original edutainment value by showing the many ways our body can suffer under all kinds of health problems, and is more than happy to lean into the grit that comes with it. But more than simply being an edgy gimmick, Code Black's particularly concerned with the working conditions that come with this scenario. The blood cells are constantly overwhelmed by huge payloads with little time to deliver, while the cells they deliver them to are forced to work with what little resources they're able to get their hands on. Their seniors and co-workers push them to a breaking point to get their job done before the body collapses, while everyone around them loses sleep to keep things going. It's a harsh environment, and with the aforementioned hazards, it quickly becomes a nightmare to deal with. Something that, given the stress its body seems to be dealing with, may be the result of similar real-world circumstances. This metaphor is only bolstered by the fact that, in Japan, referring to a business as a black company marks it as one riddled with these kinds of intense and toxic conditions. It's a show with a lot to say about workplace culture. Cells at Work Code Black uses its darker tone to explore all the technical and thematic issues surrounding its original premise in some fascinating ways. Skate the Infinity is an original anime series directed by Hiroku Utsumi and produced by Studio Bones set in Okinawa, where a vibrant skateboarding community full of in-your-face punks with everything to prove, and ultra-rich stage stealers with everything to lose, compete against each other in no-holds-barred races has sprung up. As Reki, a skateboarding enthusiast, and his new friend Langa, a Canadian-Japanese transfer student with a knack for the sport, roll headfirst into all the twists and turns this underground scene has to offer. And it is about as over the top as that description would imply. It's got a tournament arc riddled with melodramatic rivalries, it's got political tension driven by governmental conspiracy and collusion, it's got dirty tricks up every sleeve and special attacks tucked up every ass to pull out at just the right moment. And you just know they knew exactly what they were doing when they were designing some of these characters. Okay, I'm going. It's filled with all the anime bullshit it can muster, and I will admit, a lot of my own nostalgia is probably influencing my enjoyment here. Though I've never been able to figure out how to actually ride a skateboard, I've always had an admiration for it. Hell, I remember one year on holiday I found a copy of a Tony Hawk game for the apartment's PlayStation 2, which had no memory card, and so I wasted literal hours seeing just how far I could get before I had to start all over again. And even just knowing that Thomas Romaine, who you might recognize if you've seen my video on Oban Star Racers, or are one of the few people that remember Code Lyoko, the other fever dream of a show he played a large part in, through Studio No Border helped design the boards, which just added to that nostalgic appeal for me. But just as the show embraces its own over-the-top style, so too does it embrace the eccentricities of skateboarding itself. It's full of these larger-than-life personalities showing off just because they can. Its best moments come when its characters forget about everything and just fuck around with nothing but a bored and stubborn determination. It leans into the idea that practically defines its philosophy of achieving success through constant, consistent, and painfully frequent failure, and the way it pushes some to new heights and breaks others. There's just a tangible appreciation and respect for the culture that defines this sport. Skate the Infinity gives skateboarding the kind of anime bullshit treatment it deserves. Horimiya is a rom-com directed by Masashi Ishihama, produced by Cloverworks, and based on the manga and webcomic of the same name by Hiro, about Hori and Miyamura, a pair of high schoolers on opposite sides of their school's social spectrum who, after a chance encounter, find their normal selves standing in stark contrast to their school selves, and in which they find a relationship that slowly blossoms. Actually, that last part is a lie because, spoilers, they get together in like the first few episodes. They basically hit things off right out the gate and quickly develop an intuitive understanding of each other through their aforementioned secret selves. Something that makes it easier for them to open up to the other about all kinds of things, even if they stumble over their own words to do so or have to grit their teeth to make the other happy.
それともこう、堀さんが暴力振るったら怒鳴った方がいい？いや、そんな。てめえ、これ京子。誰に向かって口聞いてんだ？いいかも。
It is shocking how efficiently it develops its main character's relationship, doing so without any of the humming and hawing about will they or won't they that can often drag down an otherwise good story while still feeling natural in the steps it takes to get there. It's practically a romance speedrun, and like any good run, there's plenty of chaos to find even in the most seemingly perfect route, as it features a wide cast of supporting characters who each have their own relationship troubles to work through, all the way from childhood friends and bullies trying to reconnect to love unrequited out of insecurity or out of hand, to even the weird ways some try to compete for their love's favor. Through this interpersonal web of connections, the series explores many unexpected and painful details and developments that can so often define so many relationships in teenage life, for better and for worse. And there's a sincerity to it that makes even the most bittersweet endings in their own way heartwarming. Horimiya captures all the messy and awkward details of high school relationships, both romantic and platonic, with some surprisingly effective efficiency. City of Ghosts is an animated series created by Elizabeth Ito about a group of kids who form a ghost club to investigate all the weird and wonderfully wholesome hauntings popping up across their hometown in LA. I've always had an interest in these kinds of pseudo-documentary style animated shows, whether they be laid-back shorts, lighthearted hybrids of multiple mediums, or just an absolute trip not meant for kids. And this show is no different, but I continually found myself being floored by well, everything it does, honestly. Its animation is this fascinating blend of 2D, 3D, and live action that gives it this abstracted depth and texture I can't get enough of. So much life and personality has been poured into its characters, particularly the Ghost Club itself, whose attempts to make what they understand to be a documentary with whatever bits and pieces they can find is just delightful. And it's just as interesting to watch the way the people they meet recount their experiences and history with LA's many subcultures and communities, and the way they've developed over the years, without completely losing that laid-back tone. And as endearing as it is to watch as an adult, it's the kind of thing I know I'd have gone absolutely nuts for if I was a kid, and I'm sure there's plenty of children for whom it'll do just that. City of Ghosts is just a charming little series. And yeah, those are my thoughts. Another season, another roundup, and I gotta say, and this might sound a bit strange, but I will admit, I feel kinda weird about the fact that I didn't have any games to talk about. Just been playing a lot of Hades, honestly, which I finally managed to properly beat. It's also been weird because there's been a couple of shows I wanted to add, but which eventually got to a point where I realized I want to dedicate entire videos to them, so I've had to rejig not just this, but also what I was hoping to do video-wise for the next few months, just to talk about them, which was an experience. I mean, granted, the things I was originally going to do are things I can do whenever, but still. Anyway, hope yours are staying safe, washing your hands, keeping your distance, etc. And let me know what you think. If you agree, disagree, why your favourite things of the last while have been, why you're looking forward to in the next few months, etc. And thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this and want to see more, then check out my last video, where I ramble about what I love about Puparia, or watch me talk about the complicated nature of horror in 2D, and the unique ways it can, in fact, scare. And don't forget to like, comment, share, and of course, subscribe to come fly with me. Hit the bell to stay notified, follow me on Twitter for more updates, ramblings, and poor attempts at humor, follow me on Instagram for semi-regular art stuff, and hopefully, I'll see yous later.